You're alive.
This is Senate Transportation. It's Wednesday, April 8th, and we are here and going to talk about pilot money. And we have Ted from Joint Fiscal.
For the record, Pat Burnett, Joint Fiscal Office. Have a document that's kind of a high-level overview of expenditures and appropriations and revenue in the pilot special fund in both fiscal years 26 and 27. And so the way, generally speaking, to look at this document, at the top, there is the fund balance at the beginning of the fiscal year. And then lines 2 through 10 are line items and overall sum totals of appropriations and or expenditures. And then finally, 11 and 12 are projections of, or 11 is a projection of revenue in those 2 fiscal years. And then finally, the projected fund balance at the end of those fiscal years. So this is the
One page.
all on one page. And so I can go through. So the main use of this document is to see the difference between appropriations and expenditures, right? A lot of times appropriations, folks think that is actual money. It is not, it's spending authority. And so within the pilot special fund, there is a difference between the appropriations that have been made out of the fund and then expenditures that are happening in just different fiscal years. And this document gives a window into that trajectory. So
Are we able to put it on screen?
oh, I thought it was
that.
I thought it was
I'm
Oh,
I'm on the website, but
okay, actually, well, just for the public.
yeah, hold on. I'm going to share my screen.
So-
That is, I thought I was doing
it is
that.
posted.
Okay, I'm looking, I'm getting to it there too.
There we are. Man, I got way ahead of myself.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
I feel like I've seen something like this before. I don't know, but so can you just explain the last part here? So you're saying that the BAA is the left column is what has been appropriated already in the BAA, and this is what has been spent out of that appropriation.
In the fiscal, so in fiscal year 26, the Budget Adjustment Act, right, is making appropriations, and then the second column here, where my cursor is the expected expenditures of that appropriation. So, maybe it'll help to go line by line, because there are different, right, like annual recurring appropriations, one-time appropriations that have a few fiscal years of expected expenditures. So I can go through those line by line to kind of see what's in each line item. So the line 2, so starting out fund balance at the beginning of the fiscal year. So the pilot special fund ended with a fund balance in fiscal year 25 of just north of $15 million. The first and most important thing that happens in the pilot special fund is the general pilot payment, right? These are our payments to municipalities for state-owned buildings that they host. And so the appropriation, both in fiscal years 26 and 27, are $12.2 million. We already know what the pilot payment is going to be in fiscal year 26. They make those payments in the fall. And so that of the spending authority of $12.2 million, the pilot payment itself is $11.3 million. And then we have the payments for correctional facilities. Those payments are always what they're appropriated at. The correctional facility for Newport and Springfield might be a little bit less. It's based on contracts and with those 2 towns. So, but it's usually pretty close to the appropriation. In line item 5, there was a $1 million appropriation for the Grand List Stabilization Program. That appropriation was intended to cover the program for a few fiscal years. It wasn't clear how many buildings, right? So that's making payments to municipalities that is reflective of the grand list value of buildings that have been bought out through the either FEMA or state level buyout programs. And so it wasn't, they made $1 million appropriation to start the program up. It wasn't clear how many buildings were going to make it through that program and actually be bought out. And so then register a payment to towns. in fiscal year 26, they're expecting that expenditure will be $82,000. And then it'll grow a bit in fiscal year 27 to $200,000. The next slide item is a property valuation model for communications property. This was 2 years ago. There's legislation that required communications property defined as towers, switches, kind of the nuts and bolts of running a telecommunications business. Putting that property on the grand list instead of the pretty outdated form of taxation, how this was being applied to that property. And so in order to get that property on the grand list, the PVR, Division of Property Valuation and Review, worked with a contractor to inventory that equipment, value it, provide information to town so they can, it's a complex valuation task for the piece of the property. And so, yes, this was, they're going to work with the contractor over a few fiscal years. And so the appropriation was $500,000. They're anticipating it to be about $500,000 over 3-ish years. And so the expected expenditures in fiscal year 26 and 27 are $150,000. Line 7, this came from the budgets. The town highway aid for non-federal disasters, $1.5 million is intended to be a one-time. It appears in fiscal year 26, but won't carry forward in fiscal year 27. And then we've talked about, I think to some capacity, the reappraisal and listing payments. These originally were made out of the general funds. They're per parcel payments for either maintenance of the grand list or doing the equalization study. And so in total, those collection of expenditures are $3.4 million. And so instead of happening out of the general fund in fiscal year 26 and 27, they would happen out of the pilot special funds.
Is it a one-time or reoccurring?
This was in 26 and 27. The House was considering making this a more permanent switch before in the miscellaneous tax bill. That came out of the miscellaneous tax bill in a floor amendment. And so right now it is a fiscal year 26 and 27 structure. And so it's a policy decision on how those payments are funded.
But the payments will occur every year.
They occur every year. Yes. The question is whether they occur in the general fund or
Okay.
What is your $8 parcel?
Oh, it's that one.
Yes.
Okay. So it has revenue.
Yes. And so in fiscal year 26, the amount of total appropriations coming from the pilot special fund are $18.8 million, but the expected expenditures are 16.6, almost $16.7 million. And so when you apply that total amount of expected expenditures to the JFO consensus or JFO tax consensus projection for revenues in fiscal year 26, you'll see that expected expenditures are above the amount of revenue that's coming in. And so, yes, dip into the fund balance a little bit. And so projections, this is totally an estimated amount. At the end of fiscal year 26, that amount would be $13.2 million. In fiscal year 27, you'll see that since some of these one-time appropriations aren't being made, but they're continuing expenditures through those appropriations that are expected in fiscal year 27, the amount of appropriations is lower than the amount of expected expenditures in fiscal year 27. So starting with that $13.2 million of expected fund balance, looking at the amount of expected expenditures of $16.1 million of all those line items against the estimate of revenue. So this is including all of the towns that voted. We worked with tax to get a sense of what those new municipalities might bring in local option tax revenue, and then portion it according to the 75-25 split. We're looking at $16.193 million in total pilot special fund revenue in fiscal year 27. So 16.152 million in expenditures against that revenue. And so they're pretty much right on the nose in my current structure. And so the fund balance would go up a little bit, but be somewhere in the $13.2 million range if our estimates come to fruition. And this bullet point, I did want to just note that, you know, there are conversations about what the split between municipalities and the pilot special fund should be. And so if there is a 5 percentage point change in local option tax revenues allocated to the pilot special fund, you would change the amount of fund revenues by approximately $3.2 million when including the towns that approve local option taxes.
Could you repeat the 3.2,
Yep. So
the 3.2 represents,
theoretically, if you were to change the allocation to, let's say, going back to what it was, not that you would do that,
yeah,
70-30, you would see about $3.2 million less in or $3.2 million more in pilot special fund revenue.
Yep.
If you increased it to 80-20, for example,
Yep.
you'd see $3.2 million less into the pilot special fund, just making the case that with those changes, with the current structure of the pilot special fund, it would dip into the fund balance at that point.
go ahead.
Just, what's the appropriate amount of the fund balance?
So the fund balance is, so this is reflective of what would be left over given the appropriations.
I understand. What's
Yeah.
the target? Because it seems large to me.
There is, right, that would be a policy choice by y'all to determine how much expenses are happening in the fund, right? You would want to make sure that there's enough fund balance. Let's say hypothetically there's a recession or you see dramatically different revenues coming into the fund, and then you would want to make sure you have enough to cover the payments to municipalities and correctional facilities, right? Those are kind of the baseline expenditures that have been happening in the pilot fund ever since they were created. So yeah, you would want to make sure you have some cushion, but there's no explicit reserve or target.
And 26 doesn't include the 13 towns that voted, but 27 does.
Yep.
And is it for 27 a full year's revenue from those communities, or partial, or what do you?
Great question. So for fiscal year 27, it includes a full year revenue for the new municipalities who started in fiscal year 26. It does for all of the municipalities who voted include 11 months of revenue. In talking with the Department of Taxes, they would be able to bring those towns online essentially on July 1. But because businesses are reporting on July revenues in August, you always lose that first month of revenue. So it's 11 months of revenue. In fiscal year 28, they would be at a full fiscal year.
And what you've included is the 13 towns that are 0 to the 1%.
Yes. So this does not include Stowe.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's just the 13 towns.
Yep.
And when I end the 27 year, am I looking at, should I be subtracting, what's my final balance?
Your final balance, given the current construct that is in the budget and all the appropriations that were made for fiscal year 26 that carry forward, you should be looking at this number of 13.2 million. This number in the lower right-hand corner.
Lower right-hand corner, so that's what's left over after everything.
What we're estimating, yes, at the end of fiscal year 27
And, there were 7 towns that had local options that didn't pass. And they'll probably be back around, because most of these, it takes once or twice to get that. So we know of at least 7 others that are interested, so this is potentially growing.
Yes, I think the point of nuance that I've been thinking about when trying to look into my crystal ball, it's hard to know who's going to put it up to vote, what the political economy in those towns are. I wonder about, of the split, you could have a group of municipalities that have a large tax base. And it could take just a few towns to really generate a lot of revenue. It could be a larger number of towns that have a smaller tax base. And so the question is, of the towns that haven't adopted a local option tax, is there a lot of additional revenue floating around out there? Or is it, right, we've already seen folks who could generate a lot of local option tax revenue already putting it on the ballot, already adopting it. So what's the remaining size of the base that's out there that could adopt it?
Now, I don't know all the 7 that are left out there, but I do think of Milton as a fairly good sized community.
Yes, exactly.
Other questions? Gonna have, and after this, I'm gonna have Damien come in the chair, because we ran through this and had proposals on the table. He's dusted it back off, but, so go ahead.
When we talked about this before, we talked about how Burlington and Rutland can have their own. That doesn't go into that. They just keep that on for their municipality.
Yes, it is a whole separate, they've done it through a charter change, it is a whole separate regime, they collect the revenue, it doesn't go through the Department of Taxes, yeah. Yep.
What do we call those? Is there a different name?
They have different, I would just refer to Burlington's, gross receipts tax or, yeah.
Right, or their charter.
I guess just, so the tax department has not had a problem implementing these so far? Or does it seem that they will have a problem?
So they've not indicated that, right, there was a provision when, it was 2 years ago, I'm forgetting the act number, when they allowed towns to go forward and adopt a local option tax without a charter change. The legislation gave the commissioner of taxes to limit the number of new local option taxes at 5 and then administer it accordingly. They've indicated that they would be able to bring on the 13 that have voted. I will note that generally speaking, if you remember from my presentation, that local option tax administration is not the most straightforward, and tax has come in and testify on that, right? Because you have municipal orders don't line up necessarily with postal addresses. I think the map that they share, like in Calais, there are 5 separate addresses within, or like town addresses within their municipal borders. So if Calais were to do a local option tax, it would be challenging. And I think with new technology of having shapefiles and GIS capabilities and the ability to export that to, online retailers and whatnot, I think the administration is slightly easier, but it is a big list to notify businesses who are, notify businesses who are within the municipality, some that are kind of on the border, and how to administer the tax. It is certainly challenging. I don't want to discount it, but they have indicated that they could.
And they came in and talked to us about that and said there are programs already that manage that. So good. Well, that's helpful.
So at this point, I'm sorry this took so long to get you in the chair.
Totally fine. I'm here to talk about local option taxes whenever y'all want to hear about them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You wanna, and you have the language that we considered 51.
Yep.
That's not another years ago. Maybe the show. Okay, let's go.
He can,
Just refresh.
he can
It's there a
put it
moment
up.
ago. And I can put it up on the screen if you
Yeah,
want.
if you could.
Okay.
Options for transportation alternatives, on the pilot contract.
Pilot fund.
Make sure there's some-
Well, while I'm joining the meeting, for the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
So. We should refresh.
It should be up on the website.
Yeah, this is. I just handed it to you on paper.
But
You have it in paper too.
Yeah, it's draft 4.2 should be next, yeah. Almost. Okay. So, this does a couple of things. The first is an amendment to the actual pilot special fund itself. So currently, pilot special fund payments are authorized for, in the statute, they're authorized for pilot payments for correctional facilities, which was that $40,000 line item on Ted's chart, and then for grand list stabilization payments, which are payments that we've authorized since the flooding in the last couple of years. What this would do is it would provide add an additional subsection C to the chapter, and it would say, and as provided in subsection C of this section. It's worth noting that, as you saw on Ted's chart, each year we notwithstand this and we add certain expenditures from the fund in the big bill. And that can vary from year to year. The language in subsection C would say that if local option tax revenues deposited in the pilot special fund exceeds the full amount of all payments made under subchapters 4 and 4C. So that is just the payments in lieu of taxes, the correctional facilities, and the grand list stabilization payments.
which is grand list stabilization. Okay, yeah.
3/4 of the excess amount would be transferred to a newly established local option municipal transportation special fund. So that's a new special fund in the Agency of Transportation. The next section sets that special fund up. So it's managed like a regular special fund. Its purpose is to provide additional state aid for town highways. And it would consist of transfers from the pilot special fund, any gifts, grants, or contributions made to the fund, and any amounts transferred to the fund by the General Assembly. The interest earned on fund balances would stay in the fund. The Secretary of Transportation would be authorized to seek and accept gifts, donations, and grants to be dedicated for deposit in the fund. And the Commissioner of Finance and Management would be authorized to anticipate receipts to the fund and issue warrants based on the anticipated amount. So based on projections for local option tax revenues, the Commissioner could anticipate those receipts. Monies in the fund would be used to provide state aid to municipalities pursuant to the general state aid for town highways, state aid for town structures, and town highway bridges. And for any administrative costs incurred in administering the fund. And then finally, there is a restriction in the fund that the aggregate amount of monies appropriated from the fund in any given fiscal year shall not exceed 95% of the anticipated receipts for that fiscal year. So that's designed to, without express legislative action to the contrary, to keep you from zeroing out the fund.
Oh, okay.
From the new fund, not the
The new fund,
existing.
right? So this essentially, the budget proposals that come to you with spending from the fund couldn't zero it out. You would have to approve that action on your own.
So it'd be 5%.
It's a
Fund
5, yeah,
balance, basically.
right. And it's 5% of receipts. So over time, that would build up a balance, presumably. Although that 5% can fluctuate from year to year, depending on on how revenues are doing. So the last section here just adds changes to the general state aid for town highways to provide for the use of these funds. And to provide that amount is in addition to the base funding that's already provided for in statute, and it doesn't affect the inflator. So you won't end up having, if you have really good local option tax revenues for several years, you wouldn't have this suddenly becoming a larger burden on the T fund year over year. This is separate from and in addition to the T fund monies that already go to general state aid. And so that goes over on page 5. And then subsection E is the same language for state aid for town highway structures going on to page 6. And then page 7 is, I'm sorry, it's the class 2 town highway roadway program, not the town highway bridges. I misspoke earlier. And then class 2 town highway road program again would be same language and separate from the T fund appropriation. So in each case, we've added 2 paragraphs there. The final section here is an additional proposal to transfer in state fiscal year 2027 $3 million out of the pilot special funds to the Agency of Transportation to provide additional general state aid for town highways. And that again would be in addition to and separate from amounts appropriated under the statute. So during state fiscal year 2027, when the local option tax would first be generating revenue for this, that there would be money instead taken directly from the pilot fund under the proposal that's drafted here.
You wouldn't do the 3/4.
So the thinking was that in year 1, 3/4 is not going to be very much, and we won't really know what the revenues are till the end of the year. And so the money will flow in, and then it can be appropriated in FY28.
That's really just an open question that we need to make a decision on, what we want to do.
Right.
You know, for me, I would, and I'm speaking just for myself, I would start this in 28 and say going forward from that point on. I don't think the stuff that's already in the budget we want to mess around with.
Right, and then it's worth noting the draft here does not have effective dates in it, so that's all subject to, of course, everything in the draft is subject to your policy decisions, but you can certainly finesse the effective dates based on
What's the balance at the end?
on your projections and so forth. The only one there that would need editing if you changed effective dates would be the one-time pilot fund appropriation.
So how are you calculating what's considered?
But there, this admin spend.
It is what
Yes.
is unspent at the end of the fiscal year, or what's unspent minus what's expected for the next fiscal year.
So
So like example, you could say that at the end of 26, the excess is 13.2 million. So it'd be 3/4 of that, or is it 3/4 of that minus the next year's
so that's
expected expenditure?
yeah, the 13.2 million is so the 13.2, the actual amount in there is 1275 for the covered 1275 or 1295. So just shy of 13 million is expected expenditures for the covered factors that are calculated in determining what the excess is.
So when we end the fiscal year, there's really like 400,000
Right.
left over.
And as you've seen with the general pilot in FY26, at the end of the fiscal year, our general pilot payments were lower than the budgeted amount. And I will defer to Ted to explain how all of that works, but as I read the statute, the excess would be if you take the general pilot, the correctional facility payments, and the municipal grand list stabilization, the actual there. And then you compare that to the pilot revenue. And then 3/4 of the difference is what would be transferred over to this new special fund. So it very likely is an end of the year true up. You can anticipate revenues, but you won't actually know your revenues till the end of the year when you know what the pilot payments were and so forth.
So I still don't understand how you're calculating. So if at the end of the fiscal year, there's 13 million in the pilot fund and we've made all the payments for that fiscal year. It's not 13 million, it's the excess in this.
No, it's the revenues from the local option tax. So you're comparing revenues from local option tax to statutory payments that went out of the pilot fund. So you're not actually looking at the balance of the pilot fund. So this wouldn't be taking like $9 million out of the pilot
Not
fund.
3/4 of the balance.
It's 3/4 of the revenue coming in that over and above what's required for those statutory payments. So your expected revenues
14.
were 14.88. And your expenditures there,
You're -2.
yeah, it's about 12 million, let's just say. I'm gonna be really
So
round with the numbers.
let's just be really clear, okay? So let's talk about the number, like, so it's lines 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Bingo.
Why would
Okay.
it not be 6, 7, 8?
Because that is not provided for in the statute. That's something that is done separately in the big bill. These are authorized payments that go out in either budget adjustment or the big bill.
But they're coming out of the pilot fund.
They are, but they're not specifically listed in the statute. And this says after you make these statutory payments, whatever the excess revenue is.
And then
Yeah.
would these still pitch the first example, the reappraisal, 3.4 million, or does this language say that the town highway gets ahead of that, and then if there's any left, they get the 3.4 for the reappraisal? That would
This says that the town highway aid gets the excess revenues from the local option taxes before it goes in, or basically gets passed through the pilot special fund to this no local option tax.
So there wouldn't be enough money left for the reappraisal unless there was payments. They would just get shorted.
Well, if you continue spending at your current amounts, and Ted is probably better to answer this. So
lines 5, 6, and 7 are definitely going away. The question is, would we put, because the 3.4 in line 8 is only funded through 26 and 27. So the year after, would we want to put that ahead of this and do that?
But I mean, the governor's position, as I understand it, is that is continuing. And that's the way it.
But that's not how the statute is right now, but we could easily put that ahead and do that.
But that, the way the language says it would come ahead of
But the way the language is now, but that we, what would you like to do with that?
the reappraisal. Or
Yeah, would you like to keep the reappraisal in? Or the option for that?
I thought about it, include that to have a solid position in there. But I'm assuming that's the way it's gonna end up.
Yeah, but it's got a long ways to go before it gets to the process.
Yeah,
And people will, most importantly, I think for us is we need to get, because this is a growing source. 3 or 4 years from today, if I've got another 7 or 10 towns that join and that this seems to be a growing source of money. So, what I think most important for us is we get the towns collectively in here as And I see biggest competition is the 3.4 for the appraisal. And I've got, personally, no problem that 3.4.
Right.
Being paid for by the pilot.
We've been doing it by, but going forward, should the towns be in this list at the top of the list to get considered?
I really like this proposal. I like that it sends money that was, in my opinion, generated by the towns back to the towns.
Mhm.
And just for background, this is the area where we determined that the state aid was about 6% of the need.
Mhm.
So that there is a huge need. So I think especially with the fund balance being, I mean, in 2027, it's actually greater at the end of the year.
Mhm.
We're making money. And it's a very healthy balance. And it can be adjusted if necessary. And it's likely to have increasing revenues, as you say, because we're gonna have more towns in just doing those taxes, local option taxes. So I think this is very good.
Yeah, no, I support it. I just want to make sure I understand the math.
Of course. Yeah.
Like the municipal grant list stabilization, there's $1 million in there, but it seems like you would in the future take some of that as the way the equation would work.
No, municipal grand list stabilization comes first with the way the language is written.
Okay.
So pilot payments and grand list stabilization payments come first. And after those, with the way the language is written, you take the total expenditures for pilot, correctional facilities, and grand list stabilization. You subtract that from your total revenue from local option tax. And then under the language, that difference between the two, 3/4 of that goes to the new special fund for the municipal roads.
And is there any language in there about preventing you people supplanting the money out? They're like, they were getting money in, so let's take it out.
So
Pay more.
the language for those three programs already provides that the base appropriation can't decrease per year.
Right.
And so this is separate from and apart from and is not applied to that amount. But I can put in language that this is part of language shall be supplemental to and shall not supplant the fund that you provide.
So when one's go build separate to put 2 million in there, and then they just said like, oh, good, we got 2 million from the pilot, we'll take 2 million out. And then
Yeah.
Build some bridge in Royal Cliff.
Yeah, so it provides the it provides that amounts appropriated shall not decrease the amount appropriated pursuant to the base appropriation or be subject to the annual inflationary adjustment. But I can say shall be supplemental to and shall not supplant or decrease the amount appropriated to pursuant to.
Yeah, whatever. Protection. Yeah.
That's a good point. And then it's the same formula,
Yeah.
right? And we're happy with the formula and the towns are happy with the formula. I mean, not the total amount, but I haven't heard
Do you mean the
the actual formula and, when you have an amount of,
Well, they just, it's just a number.
they just want it to be bigger.
Yeah, they just want.
Yeah.
They want.
Yeah,
what's the
but
value?
the formula that we would use is one that makes sense. And it's done, so. Easy to administer.
Well, and I think we've had reasonably positive response from the league.
Yeah, we can get them in.
Would we start this in 27? Would we start in 28?
Why would you start?
Are you asking?
I'm asking, when would?
If I could get the Fox Stand Bridge, yeah, start in 2027, yeah, like obviously. but I'm perfectly fine with this language. I'm not totally tracking like its creation and presentation to us today again. So I'm a little confused because I feel like the last time we did this with this conversation, it ended with other committees outside. Like I'm fully on board with the concept, but we did not get to the finish line on this proposal when it was previously talked about. And I'm feeling like when we opened the door, what we saw in the house was a feeding frenzy for pilot funds rather than like an actual conversation about town highway aid funding not being enough for our communities to survive on at this point, which is the actual conversation. So I guess I'm fine with it, and I just hope that it actually does this. And are we including it in the T-bill?
Yes, the language you've got in front of you, the changes you're suggesting now, when would we like to start it? And are we comfortable with this being in?
I'm good with it, and I mean, it's up to y'all on appropriations, but just with that very large fund balance, I mean, the fund balance is more than the whole use. So, to me, I don't think it would hurt to start.
Do you want going forward the 13.4 included going forward ahead of this?
Understand what you mean.
So the 13.4 by statute is not statutorily, does not continue after 27. So
Oh.
next year,
Yeah.
the general fund would be looking to fund that. If in the covered things that statutorily we want covered, would you like pilot, Newport, Springfield, and municipal grand list stabilization? Would you add the reappraisal and listing payments ahead of that? Or would you leave it out and just expect it in, when it goes to finance or down the road, somebody's gonna add that in?
Yeah, I need a discussion for a different day.
But,
It's a discussion for a different day, I think, about
Okay.
what the origin is. And I think same with the 3 million for next fiscal year that you have in there. But we could put it in the T-bill and then appropriations can talk about whether they'll keep it at that or not.
I'm not real clear, so we put the 3.4 in and reappraisal in the list ahead of this, or do we just leave it out?
I don't,
I guess for transportation, we could. You're saying 48, or even in 27. If this starts in 27, does it go ahead?
Well, in 27, we don't want it because it's already in the budget.
Well, it would, there's enough money in there that it would still get paid, but you're only taking the delta. And not the fund balance, so there's still be enough fund balance to pay it, so I don't think it matters.
Would we start this off with a dollar amount in 27?
Yeah, we could, and then we'll. The appropriations committee, I mean, the transportation committee could say it's $3 million, but the appropriations committee might change that.
Right. And 3 million is about a 10% increase in town highway aid. Because the town highway aid is about 30 million.
That's in some regard, the drop in the bucket won't be noticed that much by the town, but we got to start seeing.
Yeah,
We'll help them notice.
I mean, it's $3 million, but over spread amongst
Yeah.
250 pounds.
but when was the last time they had a 10%
Oh, no,
increase?
there's.
Yeah, okay.
No, we're making progress.
Yeah,
I would say at least if we weren't losing ground.
Yeah,
Are we good with this?
Yep.
Okay, I think. Would you get, yeah, all of that?
So you're good with it? Effective date is July 1 of this year.
Mhm.
And it's,
It would reflect what we're doing.
Yeah.
And.
we'll have that there, so like,
I'll add that language, so you'll see it in
Yep.
when I when we actually go through a full T-bill draft. So,
And then we have we're gonna do the $3 million amount, so this will be. And I asked Ted if he could do a sheet like this that would roll out to 28, so we could see it all.
If you could have a row for the delta, that would be helpful.
all right, so, do we, Mr. Chair, did you want to move to the language as passed the House and go back to the points where the committee would had discussion and questions, or
I think,
move to something
well,
else?
what are you ready to talk about?
I can be flexible here to some extent. I'm ready to talk about that. I have some transportation alternatives grant. You asked for 2 options on the language.
Yep,
I have that. I think Megan is holding that
Wow.
right now, so.
we also, we put 2 options on the table with purchase and use tax. And
Yes,
we need some direction from the committee and what you're thinking and where we might go.
What?
Making it only salt sheds and not bike ped.
well, so
This is
Um,
your draft 1.1.
the transportation alternatives
Yeah.
grant language.
Yeah, so we're going over now.
I think the chair, I'm not sure, are we doing purchase and use or transportation alternatives?
The transportation alternatives, I had Damien send across the hall to the chair of natural resources. And she's going to look it over and offer some advice on that piece. So I'd like to wait till Senator Watson gets a chance to come back in here.
Okay, well, I just have one point, which is I had emailed you and Megan related to this language, not this specific language, but these sections that you're changing, and had requested 2 specific individuals to come testify. And there was a question about what the relevancy was of having them come testify and why. So I had explained that in the email. And then I guess what I'm confused about is now it's going to be discussed in a separate committee. Are we going to hear witnesses on this? Are they hearing witnesses on it? Because I have very deep concerns with the proposed language, and I would love to discuss it as a committee with reliable sources in the bike ped community. So I guess I'm wondering when that can happen. how
I
it-
feel most, the first thing we need to do is make sure that our colleagues in other committees, and then, once we get that information, we will go beyond that to figure out. But the Natural Resources Committee, has spent a fair amount of time talking about a couple of bills that would relate to all of this. And so, I wanted to make sure that we didn't stand up on the floor and they stand up and ask us questions. So as soon as she weighs in, then we will discuss
And
who else. to have.
So we're waiting for Senator Watson to weigh in on the language that you proposed or the language that's in the T-bill that came over.
We
from
sent
the
her
House?
over the language that's in the T bill.
Okay,
We sent, Damien, sent her that language.
So we're not advocating for a proposal, so it wasn't sending over this language for her to confirm, it was to make sure she's comfortable with the existing language.
Right, and there are two options in the language there. One, so based on the discussion that we had, my notes had that the committee was considering, so the current language is, if you just leave it, prioritizes bike paths.
Yes,
There was also, the two notes I had, prepare an alternative that would prioritize both salt and sand and bike path, and prepare one that would substitute salt and sand for bike path. So,
yes, that's the one that I see on the website.
right, so option one is do nothing, don't change what's in the bill. Option two is really what's listed as option one in that draft.
Okay, that makes more sense, that's
And
where
then
I'm getting
option
confused.
three is what's listed as option two.
Okay,
Um,
thank you, I appreciate that.
and I'm sending Senator Watson this draft so she can also see the language drafted, but she has what came over in the T-bill. And I'm gonna make sure she has that as well.
Okay, and will they be hearing witnesses?
I don't know.
Can we
She
get
mentioned
witnesses?
to me that her committee, would by Friday take this up. And, we will circle back around, but I thought, they've spent a lot of time in this area, in other, so, as soon as we hear back from her, we'll, I think it will answer some questions about how we want to proceed.
Could we hear from witnesses though on this either way? Like when we get it back from her, can we hear from folks?
Yes. If there are no changes in the bill, if that's the path, I'm not sure we need a lot of witnesses.
I still think it's important to hear from someone other than the Agency of Transportation on proposals that impact them. Whether or not we agree or disagree, or the ultimate outcome is.
It will all depend on how much time we have before next. I'm hoping that we have more time and are able to take that up. And the part of the issue will be what they want to do across the hall and so I think we need to move on to the next issue.
Okay, so purchase and use tax.
Yep,
Um,
get some feedback from.
I just posted what you had yesterday in Marie purchasing use, is that right, Jason? Draft 3.1.
think so. Just a second here. Yes. That has not changed from yesterday. So the purchase and use tax proposals, the initial proposal that came over in the governor's recommended budget was a 5-year step down of the purchase and use tax transfers to the education fund. The proposal that was sent over by the House in the big bill, or the miscellaneous tax bill, excuse me, would have changed the allocation of purchase and use tax revenues from 2/3 to transportation, 1/3 to education, to 73% to transportation and 27% to education. Not enough coffee this morning. And then would have backfilled the education fund with meals and rooms tax revenues, which would then reduce revenues going to the general fund. So it shuffles revenues essentially from education to transportation and then brings in revenues that would have gone to the general fund and puts them in education. The two proposals that are in the draft that's in front of you do not address what happens to as far as general fund versus education fund, but they do address transfers to the transportation fund from the education fund. So in the first option, it would transfer $10 million from the general fund to the transportation fund rather than from the education fund to the transportation fund. And then in the out years 2, 3, and 4, it would take the governor's recommended proposal for reducing the purchase and use tax revenues to the education fund and reallocating that to the transportation fund. And then in year 5, there would be no more revenue from the purchase and use tax to the education fund. It would all go to the transportation fund. The second option, and
There's just a question. to
Sure.
make sure I understand. So the language says on page 1.
Yep.
About that the amount received from purchase and use and the amount received is to the education fund.
Yep.
And so the assumption is that if the education fund receives less, that stays in the transportation fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, the language that's in Title 16 is an exception to the default language for the purchase and use tax, which directs all purchase and use tax revenues to the transportation fund. So
Okay.
when it was originally enacted, that's where they went. And then I can't remember when, but at a certain point, to address education shortfalls, they began transferring
Okay.
a third of the purchase and use tax revenues to the education fund. And so the remainder ends up in the transportation fund.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be sure.
Right.
I was understanding.
The FY 27, it would be the full third. It would be as it is today.
Yeah, for FY 27, it would be as it is today, and the $10 million to the transportation fund would come out of the general fund instead. In FY 28, you would see about 20 million out of the ed fund back to the transportation fund, and this is assuming we don't have a recession that affects purchase and use tax revenues. And then you would have the guaranteed 31 million to the education fund.
But the first year of the purchase and use tax coming out of the ed fund would be 28,
Yeah,
and it would be 20 million. And in the second proposal, the first year would be 10 million.
that's right. So the second proposal,
It is a slower slope.
yeah, you can think of the first proposal ends up with all purchase and use tax back in the transportation fund in 5 years and a 4-year drawdown of the education fund beginning in fiscal year of the purchase and use tax to the education fund beginning in fiscal year 2028. The second proposal is a 6-year transition for the transportation fund to begin receiving all of the purchase and use tax revenues. And the education fund drawdown begins in fiscal year 2028 and goes through fiscal year 2031 would be the last year that purchase and use tax revenues go to the education funds. Fiscal year 2032, everything would be fully into the transportation fund.
And so do we have the bonding language?
I just got an edited draft. I have not shared it with Megan yet. I did share it with you and Chris and Logan. Do you want me to share it with the committee or do you want to look at it?
We haven't seen the language, but the concept really is that part of the transition into this could either be more general fund money coming over. Or we could look at bonding. So there will be two paths laid out and directing the agency to come back with two budget proposals, that one that showed included bonding and one without. And they would make a recommendation, and so we would be facing in our budget votes next year. We would have two flushed out proposals to be able to move ahead. And that language, as soon as if it's ready to go, maybe now would be a good time to.
Sure.
And a lot of the bonding is prompted by exactly what you've talked about.
Yeah,
So let me email that to the committee. And of course,
you are the committee.
No, not email.
Can I ask you a question while we're
Sure.
doing that? So when you talk about the two separate proposals, we have a lot of moving parts now with the pilot and the purchase and use. How is the agency gonna show like is the differential in the two only going to be the bonding,
Well,
or is it multiple different?
multiple,
Okay.
it's designed to get a proposal on the table that has been vetted to talk about, that will give us a choice of taking a track with bonding or not take. If we have a great economy in the next year and general fund comes in with $100 million surplus, we might not have to bond.
Okay.
But if we don't, and the reauthorization bill came through and we needed money, and the general fund is not, it would, the idea is to set up a track where we can have it all laid out in front of us, both with bonding and without, or something in between.
Good, and just a comment, we've been in a scarcity mode for years, so there might actually be needs that we're just saying, oh, we can't do that because we don't have the money, but they really are needs. So I think we should be clear about the needs, and we might want to define them more. Like transit.
okay, so I sent all of you the language. Should be arriving in your email, and then I can put it up on the screen here too, if that's helpful.
The idea is the progression here.
Do you prefer to just look at it on your devices, or would you like it on the screen?
Why don't you put it up on the screen?
Okay. Okay.
It's also posted on website.
So the language here is, I would consider this an initial draft. I base this on bonding authority that we last granted following the 2008 recession. So this is based on what was in the 2010 T-bill. So it authorizes the state treasurer to issue transportation infrastructure bonds for state fiscal years 2028 and 2032 in an amount approved by the General Assembly as set forth in the subsection B. And then it would basically require the agency to request the issuance of or it authorizes the agency to request the issuance of not more than $10 million in transportation infrastructure bonds per year to provide funding to eligible projects, and then makes that the authority to actually issue bonds subject to approval by the General Assembly in an act relating to that fiscal year's annual transportation program. So which is the T-bill. But that's really our unofficial name for it. So for reference, for folks who are not familiar with the transportation infrastructure bonds, they're limited to infrastructure that has a long life. So we restrict their usage specifically to things like bridges, culverts, and then other infrastructure that has a 30-year life. And that's all set out in 32 VSA 972 D. So let me share a new window with you just to show you that language here. So if you look at D here, this provides that you can use the bond funding for rehabilitation, reconstruction, and replacement of state or municipal bridges and culverts, as well as rehabilitation, reconstruction, and replacement of state roads, railroads, airports, and necessary buildings that after the work would be estimated to have a minimum remaining useful life of 30 years or more. It can also be put into a permanent reserve that's required by a trust agreement. So for example, when we last authorized bonding, we authorized $13.5 million in 2011 when we authorized bonding. That's not the last time it happened. We authorized $13.5 million in bonds for transportation purposes and up to $3 million additional for reserves as determined necessary by the treasurer based on the bond sale.
And it says the reserve is to secure the bonds.
Yeah, so if you enter into that to secure the bonds, then the treasurer is authorized to do that. And what would happen with the language that's in the bonding language itself is, so this is an initial authorization. And then what happened after 2010 is that when AOT came back with a proposal each year, the transportation committees considered it, and then they authorized specific bonding language based on testimony from AOT and the treasurer and a consideration of the state's transportation needs. And that would include the specific language about whether you want to include additional authority for reserve, et cetera. So that's the first part of this draft. The second part the chair asked me to prepare is a report back on or before this coming November 1st to the Joint Transportation Oversight Committee that would identify projects proposed for the state fiscal year 2028 transportation program that are eligible to be funded with the proceeds from issuance of $10 million in transportation infrastructure bonds, including an analysis comparing present value of the estimated cost to pay for the identified projects using transportation infrastructure bond proceeds to the cost to pay for the projects on a pay-as-you-go basis. So the way we're doing it currently. And a comparison of the project schedules if funded with transportation infrastructure bonds to their schedules if funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. So could we see a difference in the schedule to, for example, complete bridge projects or something like that if we use bonding, or would we have no difference under the proposal? And then the final section would require that the 2028 transportation program or proposed transportation program would include both a proposal that includes the use of $10 million in transportation infrastructure bond proceeds and a proposal that does not include the use of bond proceeds so that you could compare and contrast them when you're considering the transportation program next year.
What do you think?
I'm very happy this is in the plan. I think so the way it happens in the capital bill is we authorize debt, but then the treasurer, on a more, it's not random, but it's certainly not every year that they go out and bond. So we just need to make sure that the language authorizes the debt but doesn't say that they have to go out every year and do 10 million. They might prefer to do 50 million after a certain amount of time. Or maybe even now, if we think we're gonna need that much,
This
but let's
was
talk
all,
to them
this was all based on what was done in
in the past.
2010, 11.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah.
And we might actually even wanna just look at the statute and see if it needs a little bit of refreshing,
Well,
quick, easy
I
refreshing.
think they said in the treasurer's office that 50 million was. So, I don't know how we would like to word this,
Right, that's what I'm saying, is we should just talk to them because,
but it gives the option between if, in my mind, if the general fund came in with $100 million worth of surplus, we'd probably go, but I'm not thinking that's likely. And we've got reauthorization coming, and we might be struggling, depending on what that is, what to make the match. This gives us two tracks to mix and match.
yes, and we have a lot of needs for operating that are not being met now, so we could use this for construction. No, I think it's great, it's, we just need to vet it and look at the actual way they do things.
Go ahead.
I like if we're asking them to do the two budgets, where they really had it. I just wonder two things. One, if 10 million is the right number,
Mhm.
and if we want to give them flexibility to pick the number, or do we want to have it back on here, or do we want to, since we're going to have some oversight over it, I don't know if it matters to them, but I just always feel like to talk to the treasurer office again about that number, and if we,
We should send this language to the treasurer's office. yes.
yeah, if we have to show his name, Jim, just like that. I don't-
White,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, or the treasurer's office. But then also, yeah, that this authorizes the issue of transportation infrastructure bonds. And we might, seems, what I remember from the testimony, there might be a reason why you want to do GO bonds, but use the TID money to pay back the general obligation bond. Do you want to give them an option, or again, just send it to the treasurer's office, and say it's just
Well,
what they want.
I'm a little. When we go outside of our bailiwick, which is general obligation bonds, that becomes institutions, that becomes.
Yeah.
And I think we all know that someplace down the road, education is gonna need money for school construction.
Right, well, I'm just saying to give them the option.
Well, I'm fine with the option.
Or at least ask them, like, do they want the option, or does it not really matter, or just things that are maybe they can deal with it some other way, but I thought. If it really makes more sense, we have the room to do general obligation bonds. I don't want to tie their hands by saying, no, it has to be it.
And for me, the other piece is if we put a proposal in that is with a longer tail for purchase and use. And do that, this gives us places to go to look for one.
Yes, so that's a good point, is the GO, because the GO would be less costly to the state, and there probably is a way to say that these bonds, even if they're general obligation, that's how you pay for it, but if the intent is that it goes into the transportation fund, you could probably say that. And then we might want to, they might want to use the whole 50 million authorization generally, but then have the General Assembly use it or approve a certain amount of that over time. But what did you do before when you had to?
I was only here when we created it. I was here when we did when we set up and did the bonding piece.
Because if we could do 50, we should do 50, because there's a lot of needs.
Well, I'm gonna
I'm
say,
I'm not saying 50 per year.
I see this at the start because you want a beginning and an end. I see this as to help to ramp us up into if we choose to do the purchase and use, and present that as a plan, that I see this as an option to find money to help us into that ramping up.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering kind of what the options are. I was able to see that Damien had emailed the language, so thank you for doing that. But it's not posted, so perhaps we can post it as well, so people can see.
Which one's not posted?
This is the most maybe I gotta refresh,
Yeah,
because you're so
refresh.
freaking fan.
Yeah.
You are, look at you, you literally refresh, you're amazing. So if I'm understanding correctly, the bonding authority language that we're going over now is a proposal that you're putting out there. And is this to not do the purchase and use? Is this to do on top of the purchase and use? Where does this fit in the bigger grand scheme of things? And where does the lot money fit into this? I guess I'm kind of losing the threads of like, what are the decision points we're at right now? Cause I support bonding.
The options for purchase and use are, we have two options. One moves quicker, the other moves slower. And I
Yes.
think
And one obligates us forever in a way, the other only for a year. Is that true?
no,
So the
Do a flow chart on this.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
I'm gonna write it down.
No, we need to have a chart.
the language as passed the House makes a permanent change, but it's only
10 million.
it's only 10 million change. And then that will grow with growth and purchase and use tax revenues.
Okay. And
Um,
that's 10 million either. And then there's the second one that we proposed.
so the
Which is your
right,
language.
the second proposal that the chair asked me to prepare would take 10 million this year from the general fund and send that to the transportation fund. And then next year, it would not take any money from the transportation fund, but it would take about 20 from the education fund and send that to the transportation fund, and then 10 more the following year, 10 more the following year, and then all purchase and use tax would be going to the transportation fund in fiscal year 2031.
Okay, and that's like,
Maybe
that's the same kind of ramping up mechanism as the governors. So then we also have the governors, which is not the as passed by the House version or that version, which is also on the table.
Yeah.
But seems to
The-
be defeated in the House, so
the
we probably can't
governors-
bring that one back.
Right, the governor's recommend would reach the same endpoint as the chair's first option, or the chair's option, which is the second one we discussed, not
Oh,
as
oh.
passed House.
True.
The difference is the governor's recommend would be taking 10 from the education fund this year instead of 10 from the general fund.
So you just basically, okay,
Yeah,
this is very
otherwise the
helpful
numbers
for
are
me.
the same.
Okay,
The third,
and then does it escalate the general fund piece in the same way?
no,
It
it's
escalates
just,
the ed
it's
fund.
one time 10 from the general fund. And then in year two, nothing from the general fund, 20 from the ed fund.
Okay.
Year
there
three
we
is
go.
30 from the,
There we go.
and year four is 40,
Wow, that
and
really.
then year five. So it's the same same endpoint as the governor direct.
In both situations. Okay, so that's the first bit, and then now we've got the fourth, which is the bonding proposal.
Yep.
No.
There's one more.
One more.
There's one more purchase and use proposal, and that's 10 from the general fund
From
this
who?
year. From the
Right.
chair again
Oh,
for discussion.
okay.
So the chair asked me to draft a couple of different options to give different discussion points. For the.
Oh, that was your 1 and 2 option piece that you sent
Right.
to us before. Okay, so that's not two, that's 2.1.
Yeah.
Okay, great, I'm seeing.
So
And that would be,
the second one, what it does is it still takes 10 million from the general fund for this coming fiscal year. In the fiscal year following that, it starts a 5-year drawdown of the purchase and use tax transfer to the ed fund. So it ends 1 fiscal year later with the purchase and use tax reverting fully to the transportation fund.
Okay.
So that's
Okay, that's where I was getting confused with the governor's recommend, because it seems like that's kind of the same eventuality for both.
There are different approaches. The final option that I just gets to the point where there's purchase and use tax is no longer going to the ed fund a year later.
In the governor's recommend.
No,
In
so
this
as
figure
opposed to as compared to the governor's.
So it's a slower eventual purchase and use, no longer in.
Yes, and in the upfront to cover the revenue and slower, we would have the option of bonding. We could, and, you know, to try to spread this out for on a longer period, and bonding would be an option along with more help from the general fund, and yeah, but create a track that looks.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I want to just say, and then the 5th is the bonding proposal, which is like kind of a totally separate beast from these 4. And we would be leaving the ed fund and the general fund whole in that scenario. Like we wouldn't be taking from the general fund or the
Well-
education fund if we bonded. Am I being stupid? Like, is that?
Or we, yeah, that it could be viewed as standalone.
Yeah,
It also could be a piece of, it could be fill in to do slower purchase and use.
Like a portion of it. Okay.
Yep, so you, like, in any of the proposals that we're doing right now, we're transferring, we know we have a 30-some-odd million hole. We're transferring 10 million over. I think as we've gone through the budget, almost in every area, we've seen that we aren't meeting our,
Yeah.
we just aren't meeting our obligations. So in that, can bonding help us get to that better spot?
Okay, yeah, so now that I've seen these 5 proposals, and I also have many proposals of my own, which we haven't looked at, for revenue raising, we haven't discussed them, whether that's purposeful or based on time, I don't really care. So it seems like these are the options in front of me, if I'm understanding correctly. And if I had my druthers, I would lean more towards bonding and away from any of the 4 other proposals. I think bonding is actually the most realistic and thoughtful approach to our problem. My understanding of the 33, because my goal is filling the $33 million. That's been my goal since day 1. I'm willing to talk about raising the gas tax to meet that. That's how dire I feel this is. So if we could bond for the amount that is, to Damien's earlier point, the language around long-term stuff. I don't know what of the $33 million that is. Like, I don't know what of 33 million is long-term
Yeah.
projects or paving, which it sounds like we wouldn't be able to bond for. So I'd basically, yeah, so I'd like to be able to bond for as much of that $33 million as we can, and then do this much cleanup with ideally purchase and use from the general fund, not from the education fund.
So purchase and
mine.
use tax,
So I have a totally, I'm like all of them together.
so purchase and use tax only goes to the transportation fund and the ed fund. Does not go to the general fund.
Yes, but I don't want to take 10 million from the general fund. I would rather take $10 million. No, I do want to take 10 million from the general fund. I would prefer, so his,
Yeah,
well, wasn't he,
so the way the House addressed.
I don't want to take
that
from
is
that.
they-
I guess it's really the point.
So. Right, I think
It's your chart.
So anytime we do purchase and use, we would be taking from the ed fund, is basically what you're saying. So
Right.
but we could backfill
you can back
with
it,
the ed fund with general fund, I guess.
which is what they did in
I
the
don't know.
House.
So I'd like to do some of that for the difference of those. I guess it's my dream scenario, but it's
Right,
not an option that we've been presented
So-
with. It's an amalgamation of all.
So informally, I think we're at the point. How many here like the bonding, like some form of bond.
I do think Pat, I would really like to know Pat's perspective because he's oftentimes someone who has experience. So maybe we could make sure we run this by him before we take like an official moving in one direction.
I
Or maybe you know how he feels.
I run the, I yesterday said this is probably coming up
Okay.
because he's at an event in South Hero
Oh, okay.
today. And the event isn't till 11,
Okay,
so
we can-
he, and
He could have zoomed it.
I can't,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
only so much I can do
Yeah, yeah.
here, and we're trying to work this. How many here like a direction in bonding? Okay, so I think that's all of us that can. How many here believe in some stretch that part of the solution is gonna have to be purchase and use?
Yeah.
And it coming,
What was it?
Oh, I was like, wait.
are we
No.
gonna put a proposal that includes purchase and use?
So like the step down.
Well, it can be step down,
Yeah.
the next question is gonna be, would it be a step down for total? Would it be more of a proposal where you do 1 year, like, that, the house is done? That's the next step. How many here, think that purchase and use has to be in a package?
Yeah, because, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we can't bond, but that's only like if we can't bond for the.
How many want a proposal that is gonna be stepped down over time? That we would send to finance knowing that it's got a long ways to go, that would say someplace over 5 or 6 or over a period of time, we would ask that all of the purchase and use come back. Okay,
I don't know if I'm there yet because I do think construction money is gonna be needed for schools and I think, I think it's, I'm comfortable with that, but I also think it's so unlikely to happen in
Well,
this building.
let me-
There's
Like-
another
Let me-
idea for that.
let me
Okay.
back up. How many here wanna leave the bonding piece open for general obligation bonds or the TIB bond fund? Knowing that one of the prime areas that school construction might go after is general obligation bonds.
Oh,
I personally, I'm just gonna say this personally, I think TIB bond fund is within our purview. We should do TIB bond funds and because if school construction and education wants general obligation bonds, there's gonna be no room for anybody else. And I'm not sure we wanna be in that competition. That's-
Yeah,
Yes,
no,
me.
no, I agree. I definitely don't wanna, I want both to be able to happen. And so TIB might be a little bit more expensive, but that's what we need to do. That's fine.
Well, I was just saying the language, given the opportunity. So if there's other general obligation bonds happening, then they're like, well, we're not gonna do it because we're already at the max, so we have to use the tip. But if that doesn't happen for whatever reason, the language leaves it open that they could use geo funds.
So we'll wanna draft it with that they can choose either.
We could call it transportation infrastructure general obligation.
And
Oh, yeah.
do you think
That's
we
a
could
good
talk like amounts as well? Because I know we had a little bit of like the 10 million. And I think that's a construct that was framed in this discussion because of the governor's proposal. So I
The
also
10
do want to
The
understand where
10
that
million,
interplays.
the 10 million came directly out of the language from the last time we bond in like 2010, 11, 12.
Oh,
And
okay.
the language that Damien put in front of us, he lifted from the last time.
Oh, so we did 10 million last time.
So
Is that kind of right?
it's kind of, so we had talked about an aggregate amount of, I think $50 million over 5 years. So, which is similar to what was done the last time around when it started. It's worth noting that as the years went by, for example, the first year it was 15 and a half. And so 10 was the placeholder I picked. just because it was 50 divided by 5.
Okay,
But we can certainly tweak that.
I'd like to just give them flexibility based on
Yeah,
what they think we can do.
so I can redraft it to say an aggregate amount of $50 million over 5 years as authorized. And say, propose approximately 10 million, understanding that
Or if there's
it
some
could be 10 and a half, could be 8.
sorry, I know I'm twitching.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
No, what I heard from the treasurer, and obviously we need to verify this, is that they're suggesting at least 50 because of the cost to get the bonds. So at the state level, we could call it 10 a year, but the actual bonds would likely need to be 50
Mhm.
minimum. So let's just not, let's make the language be able to handle that.
The 50 over 5 years.
But we don't even need to say over 5 years.
Because
Because
the other piece is, if we got into this and we started to path, and there are, because these have to, if it's TIB, and because it has to be stuff with a lifespan of 20 or 30
Yeah.
years. There is a limited amount in the agency that we could bond for. And that will be all within the proposal that they come back to us with.
I actually am not worried that there's going to be plenty of projects because it's culverts. So culverts are really expensive, bridges are really expensive. But it's good that we're having the
But
agency check that out.
And that will be part of what they present to us.
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
So and if we're in this 2 years from today, we could authorize more.
Right. So you could authorize debt by the year. But the bonding itself would need to have a higher amount is what I'm guessing. And we should just take the treasurer's advice on it.
And 50 was the number I heard.
Yes.
I think we all heard here. And
Yeah.
if you got that, Amy,
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I was just taking a look at this year's transportation program, and just for reference, you're looking at approximately 11.5 million in T-fund and TIB fund dollars going towards state and town highway bridges. So there's a significant portion of the money for those bridges is from federal. And then there's local matches as well, plus interdepartmental transfers. So, but anyway, I just to give you the ballpark.
Yeah.
So what I have in my notes is, is to amend the bond or revise the bonding language to allow the treasurer to issue either TIB or GO bonds up to a combined amount of up to $50 million over 5 years. And that AOT's proposal will include the utilization of TIB bonds for eligible projects based on revenue from TIB bonds equal to, based on utilization of up to $50 million of TIB bonds over 5 years. Or I can say include approximately $10 million of TIB bonds.
did you have a conversation with the treasurer's office and ask them what they would suggest?
Sure.
And because of lack of time, if you have that conversation and get them to comment on this and bring us back language.
Sure.
And I think we're looking at 50, because we want to start in that range, and knowing that going forward in the future, if it all worked and it was, we could do more or we could do less. And we'll have proposals on the table to be able to intelligently approve stuff going forward. And I like the idea of going before JTOC and then having the two tracks presented to us in the budget. Second question comes that purchase and use tax question. And I think I saw a majority of us believe that purchase and use tax at coming back is, would we put a proposal out as the transportation committee, knowing that it's got a long ways to go and everybody all over the building has different positions. Would we do something that pulls the purchase and use tax back into the T fund over a period of time?
Yeah, 100%, like, yeah.
Is that,
This is a hand raised motion,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
disagree, yeah, I would,
would we
didn't know if that was
do
a
it?
hand raised.
Oh, yeah, no, I
Would,
did it
would
that.
we choose a longer path or would we choose a path?
Longer path.
The
I-
6 years.
Yeah, the sig, I like, because I think to dump onto the ed fund 20 million in 1 year is too much.
This is, and also not viable, like in this ecosystem.
Yeah.
I guess is how I feel, at least I feel
Yeah.
it's not viable in this ecosystem.
And knowing that the back fund is, if the general fund's got surplus and we've got bonding, so we can help create that ramp.
Yeah, we'll be cooperative partners.
So I think we just answered the question about if would be option 2.
Uh,
Are you talking about,
well, it's,
well, you're talking about in the
Of the purchase and use options.
right, well, you had
The
the
6-year option,
diagram.
the one that would do 10 million from the general fund this year, then 10 million of purchase and use drop off going out
Well,
over 6 years.
well, I don't know if we know what the amount actually is that we're asking for yet.
Well, he has,
So is that my understanding? We don't know the amount because we don't know what our bonding capacity is, so we're kind of waiting on that question. So and you're saying that it would be, so if I look at draft,
If I'm looking,
if I look at
Here-
draft 2.1 that you sent us, the
here's,
suggestion would be to take the language that you have in there related to
here,
the ed fund piece, which is on page 3 through 4. Like, is that the actual proposal?
Here-
Is that, I'm fine with
here was my
I think
thinking
it is.
in
it. If that's
that.
what I'm agreeing.
If I've got a $33 million hole that's growing, we could bond. And you get 10 back from the purchase and use. We're gonna wanna get started on some of these projects. We might wanna do $20 million worth of bonding the first year and then 10, and in that 5 years to try to fill in that gap of over that time, because we're taking longer to ask for purchase and use tax.
Sure.
yeah,
And also maybe consider some alternative revenue sources that are not declining or are recession proof. Like what we're seeing now is purchase and use was very dependent on if people were purchasing cars. They were purchasing expensive, high mileage or low fuel efficiency cars. That was what was driving our purchase and use with expensive vehicles. That trend is going away because people can't afford to drive those. So I do think this is an unstable fund for us to hang our hat on. That was my biggest disagreement. I, again, think we should actually talk about revenue sources. But I'm comfortable with this. It's very confusing, the way the language is written, not your fault, how you have to do it, but it steps it down from like 43,500 in 2027 and then 33,500, like the numbers go in reverse. So it got me very confused. So I'm wondering if there's like a chart or something that we can add to our point before, because the language, I was like, wait, we're taking $43 million out, and no, we're taking 600 whatever.
It
of a-
basically, think of it as that's the amount of money the ed fund will get from purchase and use tax.
Exactly, and that's confusing to me.
Okay,
because
Right.
I wanna know how much we're getting, not how much is not being taken.
I-
So
I
I understand that's how you have to draft it, that
But
makes sense, but if
I
we
think
could.
Logan's the guy
Okay.
to help you visualize
Yes,
what
it
is
would be
actually
very helpful,
happening.
Logan. Maybe even a column, you could have that number and
Have a
then,
table.
or,
I
cause I don't
also,
wanna agree to something if I don't understand.
I also asked Logan to do a table that is not done of what everybody has done
Okay,
and where we would fit in categories. This is what, happened in the house. And you have two very different positions in the house.
Yeah.
Between Ways and Means and what their
Yes.
transportation committee did.
And what did their transportation? Just the one time?
they did a permanent $10 million.
That was Ways.
Oh,
and
no, that's what
Means.
passed out of the, oh, there's actually like a seventh as passed by the House version.
There's a lot going on there.
I don't need.
Well, he's gonna have a chart, so you.
Passed out of committee version
Yeah.
would be the,
The chart that you did for, I think it was for purchase and use, where you had a bar for each year showing how it changed. You could just redo that chart with all these other items, like a stack, basically, the way developers do when they're doing a project.
great.
Cool.
So I think. What I heard is a longer purchase and use, which would lead towards that.
When are we going to make a decision about this? Like, when do we need to come up with like, this is the language that we're settled on? Who are we
I
hearing from?
think
to make
he's
sure that-
drafting this as we're. Yeah,
I'm making notes. So as you may have noticed, there are lots of documents of what we call orphan language that hasn't been. What you're doing right now is approving it for inclusion in the draft.
Right, okay.
So I have the working draft going. Here, so currently the working draft is 24 pages. These are going to grow it significantly. We'll probably be over 40 when I add these options to it. I'll have a placeholder for bonding until I have a chance to talk to the treasurer and put together a draft and present it to you. I'll add in the longer glide slope for purchase and use. And then as we start looking at other language,
and then we're gonna
Yeah.
get back to Den Buff. And we had a number of questions that were left in those that we're gonna have to nail those down. That's probably another 20,
that's 25 pages, so that'll put us over 60.
yeah,
Ooh,
probably
okay,
close
keep
to
it-
7.
We're doing the work. We're doing the
Yeah,
work.
and then this is exclusive of the other proposals
Which
that
I
have been
have some
discussed.
proposals.
Yes,
So, and then there's still,
we're definitely going to
couple open
want to
sections.
Monday afternoon.
Yes, and I will come after my MRI. Like I am,
Yeah,
I am taking
I'm
PTO.
just
Do we
saying,
have a time?
I'm going to
Okay.
need to get you here as long as I can hold you here on Monday, whether it's on the screen or where it is. It's a bear here when we only have 3 hours every morning.
It is.
It's. Anyways. Ken, we take a 10-minute break, please.
Yeah.
Well, if you
I
want.